The Lazy Trio! What's up guys, and welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. Today we're going to answer a question that we've all been faced with at one point or another during our journeys in Azeroth. Should you PvP or raid in World of Warcraft? Now, as much as I'm sure you all have your own preference, we're going to try to be as objective as possible to come to some kind of reasonable conclusion, and hopefully help out some new players in choosing what path they take once they hit endgame. So first off, let's take a look at raiding. What is it, when does it become fun, and what does it involve? Raiding is the path of endgame which involves you grouping up with 10 to 30 other players in order to defeat bosses that reward you with better gear. There's 4 different difficulties of raiding: LFR, normal, heroic and mythic mode, which has a set group size of 20 players. When in a raid group of any difficulty, you'll be expected to carry out the role that you signed up to fill, either tanking, healing or damage dealing. Each boss in a raid has a different set of mechanics and tactics that need to be learned in order for the boss to be defeated. In the lower difficulties of raiding, such as LFR and normal mode, boss health and damage is greatly reduced in comparison to heroic and mythic mode, where messing up a mechanic will most likely result in you being one shot. Another thing to mention is each difficulty of raiding requires you to have a higher item level to the previous one to be accepted into groups. LFR requires a rather low item level and is accessible to everyone shortly after hitting level cap, whereas mythic will require you to have an almost full set of heroic gear before people will accept you. Raiding, from my experience, becomes fun when you join a guild and start challenging yourself. There's nothing better than the feeling you get after you finally down a boss that you've been wiping on for weeks. Other people get fun from raiding purely from progression. In hardcore guilds, you'll be expected to play your class to its maximum potential, and failing to do so will often result in a kick. It's this high pressure environment that a lot of players really enjoy. Often you'll see players of the same class trying to outperform each other, and this is something that I try and do whenever I raid. As a Resto Druid, my mission is to take less damage and do more healing than any other healer in the group, even if they have a higher item level than me, and when I do outperform people, I always get a great feeling of satisfaction from it. More casual players get fun from raiding from just seeing the content, which is fine for the first few times, but if you don't push into normal or heroic, then LFR gets boring really quickly, due to how easy it is, and you don't really feel the same sense of accomplishment as you get from downing bosses on the harder difficulties. Raiding seems to be a more popular path of endgame compared to PvP, which is reflected by the amount of raiding content there is in the game. Usually there's a new raid tier with every large content patch, however, the same can't be said for battlegrounds and arenas for the PvP community. A major problem that raiders have been faced with over the years is the length of the final raid tier in the expansion. Dragon Soul, for example, was a raid tier that many people didn't enjoy, and it lasted for 10 months. Siege of Orgrimmar lasted for 14 months. Now that's a long time to be running the same bosses each week, especially once you've cleared the place on a difficulty that you're happy with. During these times you'll typically see a large drop in subscription numbers as players that only enjoy raiding have nothing else to do, and due to the amount of development time it takes for a raid tier, Blizzard can't just throw one together in a week or two if the patches have been poorly planned. Now we're going to take a look at PvP. PvP means player versus player, and it's a path of endgame content that involves you battling it out with other players, either for fun or a personal rating. At a casual level, players have the options to do battlegrounds or arena skirmishes that reward you with honour points, which can be spent on PvP gear. There's various battlegrounds in World of Warcraft, all of which focus on objectives to win, such as capture the flag, domination and siege. Arena skirmishes are a new feature that's been added in Warlords of Draenor. They allow you to queue for non-rated arenas. This is great for casual players looking to get some practice before going into ranked. Players also have the option to do world PvP, which is more common on PvP servers. This involves you going out into the world, finding players of the opposite faction and killing them. There's also world PvP areas such as Wintergrass, Tolbarad and the recently added Ashran, which hasn't been very popular since its release. Players looking to take their PvP skills to the next level can do rated arena or battlegrounds that reward you with conquest points that are used to buy the most powerful PvP gear. You'll also get a rating that will go up or down depending on your wins and losses. As your rating increases, so will the difficulty of the opponents you'll be facing until you get to the point where you're fighting the best of the best for titles, achievements and possibly a rank 1, where you're the highest rated player of your spec, but this is something that very few players achieve. PvP in World of Warcraft is not perfect by all means, and sometimes certain classes are considered more powerful than others. This can result in players either re-rolling or quitting the game entirely if they feel their main class that they've been practicing on for months isn't competitive. Class balance in PvP has been a problem for a long time. This is because classes are balanced around raiding and not PvP, and what works for raid balance doesn't necessarily work for PvP balance. Another downside to PvP is the lack of content they get in comparison to the PvE community. For the launch of Warlords of Draenor, there were no new arenas or battlegrounds. The only new pieces of content was Ashran, which is extremely unpopular, and the Gladiator Arena, which is accessed via the Gladiator Sanctum in your garrison. The fun you get from PvP from my experience is based on how well you do it. If you're in a battleground and you're top of the damage and dominating the killing blows, it's a hell of a lot of fun, but achieving that is largely based on how good your team is. If you're unlucky enough to get a really bad team, then you're in for a bad time as you'll be outnumbered in most fights and not stand much of a chance, especially in the smaller battlegrounds where you'll likely be spawn camped. Another thing that annoys me personally is how bad the matchmaking system is. Often I'll join games where the enemy team has 3 or 4 healers and my team has none, which is kind of unfair, and 99% of the time it will result in a loss. When pushing for rating in arena or RBGs, you get a great sense of accomplishment from winning games and hitting your goals, but losing feels more frustrating to me in WoW than in any other game, and I'm not sure why. It could be to do with how there's so many possibilities and options you have to change the game in PvP, that when you lose it kind of feels like you could have done more or you made the wrong choice. One thing I like about PvP is how there's a lot of things you can do to improve, and to get to an extremely high rating takes practice, coordination and a lot of skill. The final thing I want to mention about PvP that's been a major problem in the game for a few years, and is one of the reasons I quit at the start of Mists of Pandaria, is botting in battlegrounds. Typically people bot battlegrounds late at night, and joining a BG that's full of bots sucks balls. There's little to no fun in even playing these BGs. You'll get demolished if the enemy team has more real players than you, and bot killing gives very little satisfaction, so even if you win, it's not much fun. So now we've taken a look at both raiding and PvP, it's time to start coming to some kind of conclusion in regards to which one's best for you. Raiding and PvP are both very different paths of endgame. Raiders get to enjoy a lot more content than PvPers, but PvP does have a lot more replayability to it compared to raiding, as each game's very different to the last based on many factors and variables. In terms of fun, I'd say they're both as rewarding as each other, as the fun eventually comes from personal progression and gear upgrades, which is present in both PvP and PvE. On the more hardcore side of things, it takes a lot of practice, time and skill to be a high rated PvP player and a mythic raider, but both require a different set of skills. I've met and played with many high rated PvPers that are useless in raids, and the same can be said about mythic raiders in PvP. There's been an argument for years that one requires more skill than the other, which to me is like comparing football to rugby. Yeah, there's a few similarities, but being good at one isn't automatically going to make you good at the other. The same goes for raiding and PvP. For casual players with very little time, raiding and PvP are both accessible through the looking for group system. However, after running the same raid a few times on LFR, I feel like many people quickly get bored and are left feeling like they've seen it all due to how quickly it can be cleared and the lack of challenge involved. To get the most out of raiding, casuals need to look to normal and heroic mode once the novelty of LFRs run out, which is more accessible now through the group finder, but will feel like a huge step up in difficulty as LFR does very little to prepare people for harder raid modes, and as a result players who can't tackle the learning curve from LFR to normal mode are likely to either unsub or explore other content. In terms of progression, I feel like the PvP system works pretty well. As a new player, it takes some time for the novelty of Battlegrounds to wear off, and once it does, there's a good chance you've got yourself a full set of honour gear which you'll need to take your PvP to the next level. Entering the arena isn't as daunting for new players as it used to be, as the arena skirmish mode's a great place to get some practice and experience. Once you've got the basics, it's just a case of practice makes perfect. One of the great things about PvP is you can get pretty far without dedicating set nights to play, unless you join a guild with an RBG team. For PvP, you can find yourself in a battleground or arena within minutes of logging in, which is better for players who are limited in their playtime, compared to raiding, which requires a lot more organisation and time to get going. To wrap this up though, I think to get the most out of World of Warcraft you should be open to both PvP and raiding, as only doing one kinda leaves you restricted at endgame. The best players I've met in WoW raid Mythic and PvP at a high rating, because it makes you an all-round better player. Almost every PvPer I've met that hates raiding does so because they suck at it, and vice versa for the raiders. I think once people have chosen their path of endgame and consider themselves a decent player, they find it hard to go into content where they aren't performing well, and as a result they blame the content for being bad rather than their own performance. This is the reason I think the PvP and PvE community are so against each other sometimes. They've each found their comfort zone and find it hard to leave and try something different, even if it will make them a better player in the long run. So to conclude, you can get a decent amount of fun out of both raiding and PvP. There's more content made for raiders, but it doesn't have as much replayability as PvP. However, PvP suffers from imbalance as classes are balanced around raiding. If you're limited in your playtime, a more PvP focused route could be better for you, as it's easy to just log in and do some BGs, and if you've got an abundance of time, raiding in a guild and doing PvP to improve your reaction time would probably be best. Either way, you should try and become good at both before forming your own opinion as to which one's better, as each can be fun in their own way. So that's it for this video guys, let me know in the comments whether you prefer raiding or PvP, and give me a reason why. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a like as it really helps out the channel, and subscribe if you want to see more content from me in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.